A night one, the camera that saw nothing, even when it was supposed to capture everything. Night 2, the Saturday that quietly sealed her fate. And tonight is night 3, 9:50 p.m., January 31st. The garage door at Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina foothills slowly slides shut. Her son-in-law, Toamaso, watches until it fully closes, then calmly drives off, disappearing into the Arizona night. 1:47 a.m. The doorbell camera suddenly disconnects from the network. A gap of 3 hours and 57 minutes. Nearly 4 hours. That number appears in every timeline, every press briefing, every report since February 1st. And yet, for 51 days of nationwide coverage, not a single person has stopped to question what truly happened inside those 4 hours. A small window of time that may be hiding the entire truth. A Y2 a.m. Not midnight. Not shortly after she arrived home. Not right after Tommaso drove away. But 2 in the morning, after nearly 4 hours of quiet, calculated waiting. That detail isn't random. It may be one of the most revealing pieces of this entire case, because the timing alone begins to sketch the mindset of whoever planned it. And it points towards something investigators likely understand, but haven't openly stated. What is confirmed paints a chilling picture. The man who showed up at Nancy Guthrie's door that night had been there before, at least twice. January 11th. January 24th. 2 visits, spaced 3 weeks apart. Each time, he concealed himself, gloves on, hat pulled low, face hidden. By the night of the abduction, this was no spontaneous act. He arrived prepared. A 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, already packed. A visible gun holster. A walkie-talkie. Everything about him suggested planning that stretched across weeks, not hours. And according to information recently confirmed by ABC News, investigators now believe that first visit on January 11th wasn't random. It was reconnaissance. A rehearsal. He stood at her door, not to act, but to learn. He didn't rush. He looked straight into the camera, studied it, tested the surroundings, then walked away. 3 weeks later, January 24th, he returned. This time, something had changed. His posture, his confidence. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was learning. Learning the house. Learning the camera. Learning Nancy's routine. And on the night of January 31st, after Tommaso drove off and the garage door sealed shut, he still didn't act. He waited. Every second of that wait was controlled. Just like every other detail in his plan. He chose 2 a.m. deliberately. And that choice wasn't random. It aligns with 4 key reasons, each revealing a different layer of who he is and how he operates. The first reason is the most straightforward. He waited for complete silence. And Nancy Guthrie had just come home from her usual Saturday routine, a 4-hour dinner at her daughter Annie's house. At 84 years old, her schedule was consistent, predictable. Every Saturday followed the same pattern. Dinner, the drive home, the garage door closing, the house settling in. But silence doesn't happen instantly. A house takes time to wind down. Lights turn off, movement fades, routines finish. And he knew that. A lights shift from one room to another. A television flickers on, then disappears into darkness. A bedroom light dims, then stays that way. From a distance, from a position carefully chosen during earlier visits on January 11th and January 24th, a patient observer doesn't need to step inside. He reads the house like a pattern. Every light turning off, every shadow settling, every signal telling him exactly what's happening inside. He didn't need access. He needed visibility. A living room going dark. A hallway fading to black. A final light in the bedroom softening into silence. For an 84-year-old woman returning home after a long evening, that process takes time. And he gave it that time, precisely. He didn't estimate when she might be asleep. He watched until he knew. The second reason behind 2 a.m. goes deeper, into human biology. This is where the nature of the crime shifts. That hour isn't arbitrary. According to behavioral analysis and decades of criminology research, the window between 1:30 and 3 a.m. marks the lowest point of human alertness in a normal sleep cycle. During that time, reaction speed drops to its slowest. The chance of someone waking fully and responding effectively to a sudden noise is at its lowest. Core body temperature falls. Cognitive awareness is suppressed. The body's natural rhythm, at that exact hour, works against the person asleep inside the house, and completely in favor of the one moving silently outside. The former NYPD Inspector Joseph Giacalone, who has publicly discussed this case, pointed out a critical detail. Offenders operating at this level of planning often choose the 2 a.m. window. This isn't speculation. It's a pattern documented across hundreds of cases analyzed by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. This suspect didn't arrive at that hour by chance, or because of traffic or coincidence. He arrived at 2 a.m. because he understood exactly how the human body works and how to use it to his advantage. The third reason is logistical, and it ties directly to evidence investigators have only recently confirmed. A glove was found roughly 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. Another clue: a ring camera located about 2.6 miles away captured movement at 2:36 a.m., just 8 minutes after her pacemaker signal was lost. That timing is not random. It suggests a precise route, followed with intention. As someone moved through that neighborhood along a predetermined path. A path that required planning well in advance, including a vehicle staged somewhere that wouldn't attract attention at 10 p.m., yet would remain unnoticed and accessible at 2 a.m. This wasn't improvised. It was mapped out, likely during those earlier visits on January 11th and January 24th, when every approach, every exit, every blind spot was carefully studied. Investigators are now narrowing their focus. The FBI has begun asking neighbors about contractors, construction crews, landscapers, and service workers, anyone who had legitimate access to the Catalina foothills in the weeks leading up to the abduction. Both NewsNation and Newsweek confirmed this shift in direction. Because here's the unsettling reality. Someone remained near that property for nearly 4 hours on the night of January 31 st, and not a single call was made. No reports. No alerts. No concern. In a neighborhood where Aldine Meister once noticed a man simply walking down the street with his hat pulled low on a January morning, this time, silence. 4 hours, and nothing. That silence isn't random. And the FBI is now trying to understand why. The fourth reason behind the 2 a.m. timing has not been publicly addressed, but it may be the most deliberate detail of all. Nancy Guthrie relied on daily medication. Sheriff Nanos confirmed this from the very first press conference and has repeated it consistently. Her medication wasn't optional. It was critical to her survival. She had a pacemaker. She was managing chronic conditions common for someone at 84 years old. If those medications included anything affecting sleep depth or neurological responsiveness, which is highly common in patients with cardiac or long-term health conditions, then the timing becomes even more precise. 2 a.m. is not just ideal for an intruder. It may be the exact moment when those medications reach their strongest effect. Many commonly prescribed medications for pain, anxiety, or heart conditions reach peak sedative impact approximately 4 to 6 hours after being taken. Which means, if taken during a normal evening routine, their maximum effect would align almost perfectly with that 2 a.m. window. At that point, the body is at its most vulnerable, deeply asleep, chemically subdued, and least capable of reacting. And if someone knew that, then this wasn't just planning. It was precision at a level that changes everything. If Nancy took her medication sometime between 8 o'clock and 10 p.m., a window that aligns with every known routine in this case, then 2 a.m. lands exactly at the point where those drugs would be at their strongest effect. And yet, in 51 days of coverage, no report, no analyst, no press briefing has publicly addressed that possibility. Because if that detail is true, it changes everything. It suggests that whoever planned this didn't just study the house. They understood her routine at a deeply personal level, including when and how she took her medication. And now step back and look at all 4 factors together. The house falls silent. The body enters its deepest sleep cycle. The neighborhood remains unaware. and the medication reaches peak effect. Any one of these alone could explain the 4-hour wait. But this wasn't about a single advantage. He layered them, one on top of another, until every condition worked in his favor. He didn't move until everything aligned. Every variable tipped toward him, and against the woman inside. That isn't impulsive. That isn't coincidence. That is controlled, methodical planning. The kind that even former FBI agents are now describing as highly unusual in a residential abduction case. The 2 a.m. timing wasn't a guess. It was selected with the same intent as every other element. The gloves, the mask, the backpack, the holster, the walkie-talkie, even the device capable of disabling cameras across the area. And all of it points to one thing: patience, precision, and an unsettling level of knowledge about Nancy Guthrie herself. Which brings everything back to the end of that 4-hour window. 1:47 a.m., the moment just before everything changed. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera doesn't lose power, it disconnects from the network. A subtle but critical difference. This wasn't a shutdown, it was a disruption. The camera, already without an active subscription, incapable of storing footage, looping endlessly, suddenly goes dark. Then, 25 minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., something happens. The motion detection system, still active, registers a human presence at the front door. No video. No image. Just a silent confirmation. Someone was there. That 25-minute gap matters. It suggests movement before detection. He was already in position, already advancing, entering the camera's field of view with controlled timing. No rush. No hesitation. Every step measured. This wasn't panic. It was a sequence unfolding exactly as planned. Then 2:28 a.m., just 16 minutes after that detection, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker loses connection to her phone. 16 minutes from approach to disappearance. That is not the timeline of someone acting on impulse in the dark. That is the pace of someone executing a plan they already knew by memory. And at 2:28 a.m., the signal stops. Completely. Nancy is gone. Pause and consider this. Nancy Guthrie had lived in that home since 1990, 35 years. That Saturday night followed the same pattern as countless others before it. Dinner with Annie, the drive home with Tommaso, the garage door closing, the stillness of the Arizona desert settling around a home built over decades of routine and familiarity. There was no warning. The camera at her door captured nothing. No neighbor reported anything unusual. No calls. No alarms. Just silence, and then absence. And whatever happened within those 16 minutes, Nancy faced it alone, inside a home she had trusted for 35 years. She is 84 years old. She has now been missing for 51 days. For 51 days, she has been without the daily medication her life depends on. And every single hour without it is time her family can never recover. This past weekend, the Guthrie family, including Savannah, released a new public statement. It was carried across major outlets: CBS News, the BBC, NBC, Fox News. But the message wasn't for headlines. It was simple, direct, urgent. Someone knows something. No detail is too small. We cannot have peace until she is brought home. That message wasn't meant for the media. It was meant for one person, somewhere in Tucson, who saw something that night, and has not come forward. Night 4 is coming. And it shifts everything. Because the moment this investigation should have started wasn't at 1:47 a.m., when the camera went dark. It wasn't at 2:28 a.m., when the pacemaker signal disappeared. It was 12:03 p.m. on February 1st. 9 hours and 35 minutes after the signal was lost. And then, another 9.5 hours passed before anyone called 911. What happened in those missing 9 hours? And more importantly, what did that delay cost the investigation? That is night 4. The reward has now reached a combined total of $1.2 million. That number reflects urgency and time that cannot be recovered. If you were anywhere in the Catalina foothills on the night of January 31st, and something caught your attention, a vehicle that didn't belong, a person lingering too long, a van parked where it shouldn't have been, even a light turning on at the wrong hour, that detail matters. It doesn't have to feel important. It doesn't have to make sense. Because right now, even the smallest observation could be the missing piece. The FBI isn't asking for it tomorrow. They're asking for it now. 51 days have passed. And somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened at 2 a.m.